Okay, let's talk about what I call adjacent fundamentals. So adjacent fundamentals are, again, what I would say are what most instructors and most golfers would classically in the past call just fundamentals of the golf swing. The reason why I have a problem with that is because they're not truly fundamental. They're not fundamental because they're not shared amongst every golfer. Let me give you some examples of what people would consider to be fundamentals that I'm going to call adjacent fundamentals. Number one would be taking the club on plane. That would be something that I would say most teachers are gonna teach their students. It's gonna be something that most professional golfers are looking to have in their swing. Most professional golfers are gonna look to have their club be on plane up top. They don't want to really get across the line or laid off. Most players want to have some form of shallowing, whether the shaft points at the golf ball or they get a little more shallow. They don't want to get overly steep over the top, and they don't want to get way under plane in this direction. Most players don't want to have a club face that is very open, and they don't want to have a club face that's very closed. They want to have a club face that's somewhere in this range where the face is square to our back line or the club face is toe up. That's kind of the range that most people would be looking for. Most people, when they get to impact, want to have some rotation with their body. These are kind of things. I'll even give you another example, which we could really get into this one, but we'll just leave it as periphery for right now. A lot of people talk about, let's get into our right side and then get into our left side. A lot of those things I just talked about, keep your head down. It could even be as simple and as quote unquote cliche as that. A lot of those things people would consider to be quote unquote fundamentals of golf. However, why are they not fundamental? Why do I have a problem with that? Because I can find examples everywhere of people breaking those rules. Well, if people are breaking the rules, how are they quote unquote fundamental? Fundamental is something that applies to everybody. There's a foundation, and if it's going to be a foundation, it needs to apply to everybody. And it needs to be something that everybody can benefit from, and the better they get at it, the better they're going to get at golf. If it doesn't apply to everybody, it's not a foundation. So that's why I'm calling it adjacent. It's something that, generally speaking, for most people, that's going to be a good direction to aim with their swing, but it's definitely not good for everybody to have their swing get that way. Now, why is that? Well, let's break some of those things down. Let's look at shaft plane, the first thing I talked about. Well, we have Matt Wolff, who takes it more outside. We have Freddie Couples, who kind of lifts it up outside. And then we have somebody like Bobby Jones, who drags it inside. We have John Rahm and Lee Trevino, who kind of rolls it inside. Well, none of them are on plane going back. So how is being on plane a fundamental? It's not. I wouldn't change any of their swings. They're all some of the best players of all time. The top of her swing, Matt Wolff gets across the line. Bobby Jones sucked it inside, then gets across the line. Daniel Berger, Lee Trevino, Raymond Floyd, John Rahm, all get very laid off at the top of their swing. I'm not going to change that. Some people like John Daly get past parallel. Some people like Steve Stricker get very short. Tiger Woods in 2000, exactly parallel to the ground at the top of your swing. Wouldn't change any of those things. How could you? They're all some of the best players you've ever seen. Some people are going to be more steep as they come down. Some people are going to get very shallow like Sergio or Ben Hogan. Again, not going to change their shaft plane in the downswing. Some people, like Tiger in 2000, moved off to the right and then got into his left side. Some people, like Arnold Palmer, turned more on his left foot and then spun more center as he came down into impact. I'm not going to change either one of those swings. So, if everybody's breaking rules all across the board, how are those things fundamental? They're not fundamental because it's not something that's applying to everybody. What all those players have is they have different movements in different positions in their swing, and each movement they're making is basically a tool. It is a tool that's saying, hey, if I'm going to move in this direction, that's going to change my true fundamentals. It's going to change my low point. It's going to change the angle of my club face. It's going to change the path I'm swinging on one way or another. My face, my path, and my low point are ultimately going to dictate where I'm going to contact that golf ball on the club face. And how I move my body is going to determine how much speed I have the ability to create. And then from there, it's kind of a skill to be able to control your distance from there. So to me, when I look at the golf swing, there are basically two things I'm trying to look at. Number one, what are the true fundamentals they have? Are they controlling their low point, their face, their path, their contact, and their speed? Because if they're not, there's some things that we obviously can change. If they're doing those things excellently, they have a great golf swing. We don't really need to work on their golf swing. Maybe they need to do games and drills and skill building exercises to get the most out of their game, to get themselves more consistent, and to really focus their mind in and make themselves more linked into their practice in terms of connecting their mind and their body to what they're doing. But their technique is excellent. We don't need to really change anything there. But if one of those things are off, then we can start to ask the question, okay, what are they doing in their technique that we can change to make those things better? Hopefully you were changing the right thing. So let's just say it's their path that's getting off, but everything else is all, they're making good contact, their low point's good, their face is good. Well, if we're just trying to change their path, hopefully we're going to find the correct thing during their swing to adjust. That way we can fix the path without compromising anything else there. So we first look at what is going on with the quote unquote true fundamentals, and then we can make an adjustment to what's going on with the technique. To me, the technique, AKA the movements the body's making and the positions that we're getting into, are all tools we get to use to say, hey, do I need to move the swing more this direction, or do I need to move more this direction? If neutral is the equator, are we moving it more towards the North Pole, or are we moving it more towards the South Pole? If it's Goldilocks, are we trying to make the porridge more hot, or are we trying to make it more cold so we have the porridge be just right? What direction are we trying to move the swing in? And basically everything we do, every way we can move our body throughout the swing is a tool to try and control those things. So when people talk about positions, whether it's shaft plane or positions of the arm, position of the body, position of the club face, whatever it is, those things are all tools that we can manipulate. And hopefully, again, we're choosing the correct tool. We're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall. We're trying to adjust those tools to make the fundamentals, the true fundamentals, better. So that's how I want to approach what I call quote unquote adjacent fundamentals. Now, what are some things, just to get a baseline out there, that people would consider to be adjacent fundamentals that most people can try and gravitate towards, or at least people have an idea of what neutral is? That way they know if they're living on one side of the street and what direction they could move towards, and how that would change some things. Well, first off, I think the easiest way to understand what, again, I'm going to call the adjacent fundamentals are get into balance at address, take out the extremes during the swing, and then there's a couple other principles we can learn. But if you can get into balance throughout your swing and you can take out the extremes, one way or another, or another, or another, or another, or another. If you can take out the extreme movements, you're probably on the right track. Again, some people have extreme movements and they have great golf swings. So I'm not saying it's a bulletproof rule. It's just a general rule. So what are some of those things? Well, number one, get into balance at address. Whether we're doing it more with a rounded spine or we're doing it more from bending over at the waist, getting into balance where our pressure's over the balls of our feet is good. When we're out of balance one way or we're out of balance another direction, our body wants to move around to get back in balance. So getting into balance, however you're doing it at address, is an adjacent fundamental. It's something that almost everybody would agree would be beneficial to golfers. Next from there, like I said, take out the extremes. Not lifting the arms too high, not pulling them too far behind you, not taking the club super outside, not rolling it way inside, not rolling the face way open or making it way closed. Take out the extremes. From there are a few principles that most people agree would be good. Number one, turn in our body parameters. What are body parameters? Well, if we drew a line on the front of my head right here, and we drew a line on the back of my butt right here, that line and this line basically would create a box, and those would be your parameters. If we can turn in or near those parameters, again, there's always some room to play. It doesn't have to be perfect. But if we can turn in or near those parameters as opposed to standing up or diving way down, something of that nature, if we can stay very close to turning with those parameters, well, what's happening? We're maintaining our balance during the swing. And because we're maintaining our balance as we turn, we're also having a good chance of having good pressure with the ground versus if I dive down, I'm on my toes. If I stand up, I might get on my toes, or if I stand up this way, I'm getting on my heels. I'm throwing my pressure all around. So keeping your pressure, aka your balance, good throughout your swing is ideal. So again, if you can stay in or near those body parameters, most people would consider that a quote-unquote fundamental, which I'll consider a adjacent fundamental. Another thing that people would agree upon, or at least most people would agree upon, is as we turn back, we don't want to have an extreme shoulder tilt. We don't want to take our shoulders and turn them super flat this way or get them diving super steep, which again comes back to those body parameters. If my shoulders are getting super flat, I'm probably going to start standing up this way. If my shoulders get extremely steep, I'm probably diving down towards my toes and coming out of my head and butt parameters. If we can get our shoulders somewhere near a right angle to our back line or our spine, so this is our spine, get it close to right angle, doesn't have to be exact. If it's somewhere within an acceptable range, a few inches either way, most people would consider those to be a fundamental. Again, I'll call it an adjacent fundamental because there are some people with very flat shoulders like Ben Hogan. There's some people with very steep shoulders like Matt Wolff. I like a big range because I like to accommodate all players and what they do. And again, I'm looking at it as a tool, not as a this is mandatory, otherwise you're screwed. Another one that people will look at in the backswing, and I think a very important one, is making sure the arms travel a proportionate length to your body turn. And again, there are going to be exceptions to the rule, but basically making sure if we turn back, our arms aren't traveling too short over here. Why? Because if we turn and have a very short arm travel, meaning this would be a normal backswing, but our arms are traveling very short, we can't create speed. But on the flip side, if we're turning and our arms start to travel way past how much our body is turned, everything gets narrow and bunched up and stuck behind us, and it's very tough to play good golf from that position. Again, there are some players who do it. Look at John Daly. He has a very long swing, even relative to how much he turns, and he does turn a lot. Or look at somebody like Ryan Fox. He doesn't have a huge turn. He gets very much in this position, but he hits beautiful positions coming down. So again, always going to be exceptions to the rule, but most people would agree that a lot of people are going to benefit if their arms can travel a proportionate length relative to how much their body is turned. The arms aren't under traveling or traveling too far past how much their body is turned. The last thing in the backswing would be pressure. Some people like to see players have a move off. Some people like to see it be more centered. Some people like to see players get more stacked on their lead side. As long as we're at least maintaining good pressure with the ground, meaning we're not rolling pressure outside of our foot one way or another, as long as we have good pressure to where we can stay with some pressure on the instep of our foot here, it's not all to the outside or all to the outside one way or another, we're going to have the ability to use the ground as we come down. If we start getting pressure outside of our foot over here, whether the foot's actually rolling or I'm just moving way too far off, or if I'm stacking way too far this way, if we don't have pressure connection with the ground, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to use it properly in the downswing, and that's a big compromise. On top of that, what happens when we start moving way around? Well, if I move way off the golf ball, very difficult to create a turn, and from there, I'm very much set up to come over the top, where I have to sway and get the club back inside, and it's hard to use my body and have any type of rotation as I come down. Again, you can swing down the line, you could be a decent golfer that way, but I would say most people, again, would call that a fundamental. I'll call it an adjacent fundamental. Or you go the other way, start stacking way on this side, where's the club going to go? It's going to start pulling way to the inside. You're going to have your arms way more over here, and that club's going to come a lot more under plane, which again, if you can go on this side and you can correct it coming down, you can make it work, but it's a lot more work and there's a lot of compromises there. So again, doesn't mean you can't do it, but again, most people would say that's too extreme this way, so we're going to call that an adjacent fundamental to say somewhat centered as we go back, as opposed to having big move-offs. That way we can keep good pressure with the ground. In the downswing, people would say there's an acceptable range of shallow. We don't want to get way over the top and way too steep. So some people will say this is shallow enough, some people will say this, and we don't want to get way too far under plane. As long as our club is somewhere between pointing at the golf ball and getting at a right angle to our spine or to our back line, that's what most people would consider to be fundamental. I think you can be a little bit steeper than that. I think you can be a little bit more shallow than that. I have a little bit bigger range, but again, just for a reference point, a lot of people would say somewhere in this range is going to be a fundamental. We'll call that an adjacent fundamental for all intents and purposes, because most people are either going to swing steep and swing too hard across it, or their body's going to react to try and get the club back in position, and that's compromising what we're doing. Or same thing if we're getting too far under. Normally people swing too far right, or they're going to have to really stay down on the shot, and they might lose some speed. Again, can be very good ball striking, but some compromises. So again, there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. I'm not saying what the rules are. I'm just giving a reference point. And then finally, what we'll talk about is going to be club face. A lot of people are going to say the club face, the leading edge of the club, should basically be square to our back line when we get to this position. This is called P6, or shaft parallel to the ground right here. Most people say that leading edge should be square to our back line or our spine, or it should be toe up, or it should be somewhere in that range. If we get too extreme one way or another, we can't play good golf. Again, I would disagree. If you look at Dustin Johnson, he's a little bit more on the closed side, but he squares up the club face at the bottom. And if you look at Ben Hogan, he was very open coming down like this, and then he would square up the club face without compromising the way his body moved. But again, we'll call that range, because most coaches and most good players would say that's where they want to be. We'll call that for them a fundamental. For me, I'll call that an adjacent fundamental. And again, that's just a quote unquote good range to look for, or a neutral set of ranges to look for during your swing. Again, I talked about this in a previous video, but I'll say it again. If you want a visual reference for what some really good neutral swings are, I'd say watch Tiger Woods in 2000. Watch Adam Scott in 2000, even now, but watch Adam Scott in 2000. Watch Robert Rock. Watch Grant Waite. Even to a degree, watch Mac O'Grady. All those players had very neutral positions throughout their swing, and they're kind of a good representation of what is the Goldilocks zone, what's not too far one way or another if you're looking for something that most people would classically consider to be fundamental. And again, I'll call them adjacently fundamental, because I just see too many things going on where there's great players and great precedent. And I think the swing and how we move is more of a tool set to get all of our true fundamentals right. But again, if you want a visual reference point of what something neutral would be, watch those players. Really, really good examples and really pretty swings. And you can say, okay, they're not too hot or too cold one way or another. They're just basically hitting neutral positions all the way back and through. And you can kind of build a visual skeleton in your mind of what adjacent fundamentals would be, or what most people would consider to be fundamental in golf.